Hello and happy Sabbath. I'd like to first of all welcome you and thank you for spending some time to listen to this message which I'd like to share with you today. I'm just going to open with a brief word of prayer. Heavenly Father, there's so many things going on in this world at the moment. It seems every day there's something new which is causing us to challenge, to question, to get frustrated, to get angry. And we know where this is all coming from. I pray, Lord, that you will help us to protect ourselves, what we listen to, what we watch, what we take in, to protect not only ourselves but our families and friends around us from the sin, the evil that's in this world. I pray this message which I'm sharing today will give people some encouragement, some food for thought and some inspiration as well. That's in your name. Amen. So I'd like to open by reading a text from 2 Thessalonians chapter 3 verse 3. It's a very straightforward, simple text. It says, "But the Lord is faithful, and he will strengthen you and protect you from the evil one." So I'm sure by now everyone's heard of computer viruses. You get something on your computer, your phone, your tablet, makes it go slow, makes your apps not work. You get messages on the screen which are quite hard to get rid of. Sometimes we get messages on our screens that people are trying to get money out of us, are trying to scam. We get emails for products or services from a genuine company that is trying to communicate to you. You get a link that says, please click here for details on what more information we have. And I'm sure many people who are listening have been receipt of these. Many years ago I got something which it looked very genuine. I clicked on the link, but it was a dangerous link. It was spam email. It was something that resulted in me spending many hours trying to fix the problem that had been caused to my computer by it. Even over the past year or so during lockdown, it's been a field day for these unscrupulous characters who like to try and make money out of a bad situation, where we get a text message on our phone saying, oh, Royal Mail's trying to deliver a parcel, click here, because there's not enough money being paid. Before we know it, we can have our bank account hacked and other details stolen from us. And then we've got computer hackers. Only a few weeks ago we saw on the news that the HSE, the Irish Health Service, was subject to a ransomware attack. So they got into the system, these people, they blocked access to the system and threatened to expose all patient records and confidential medical information unless money was paid to effectively release access into the system again. And there's another thing which is called a denial of service attack, or DDoS, a distributed denial of service attack. And the simplest way to describe it is that an automated system from lots of different places all try to connect to a server or network somewhere, and the result of that is it effectively stops the system from being able to work. There's that many things trying to get in. They're not actually getting in, but they're trying to. They're basically blocking it. Imagine a big crowd of people with one door. No one can get in, no one can get out. That's the kind of effect which it generates. And thousands of people a day trying to hack businesses, governments, and we only have to look at a biological virus. Now, there's been many sermons and thoughts shared over the last 18 months in regards to viruses, in particular corona. We're under no illusion the effect that what a virus has on the body. But I'm not going to go into that in any more detail. So where am I going? We think right back to the Garden of Eden. Right from those very, very first days, we have been under attack. The human race has been under attack. We've been subject to tests to probe us, to see how we can be tempted, how our weaknesses can be exposed, and once exposed, then exploited. We'll just turn into the first few pages of the Bible, right at the beginning in Genesis, to see Adam and Eve and Satan, the first hacker on the earth. That innocuous fruit from the tree, shiny, delicious looking, that whole click here for knowledge and happiness. The consequences we certainly don't need to look at in any detail. We've been suffering for thousands of years ever since. They were innocent. They'd never been exposed to anything other than goodness, perfection, beauty. They weren't aware of evil when it was presented right in front of them. But they had a free choice. Probably not as much now as we used to get maybe 5-6 years ago, where nearly every week you'd have an email from some person, let's call him Dr. Kang, who was trying to get hold of a partner in the UK because he'd got a vast sum of money which he'd come into, and he was trying to get it out of his country, and he was trying to get your help. He was trying to recruit you to help him with this. He just needed your bank account details to facilitate that transfer. Looks quite easy. Hey, free money, who's going to turn that down? The temptation is there. It could be true. But I certainly hope so. We know an awful lot better than to go down that route. Let's look at David then. David was a very interesting character. He's one of my most favourite characters in the Bible. At the beginning, he started off as a humble shepherd. He rose through the ranks, so to speak, to become the king. I'm pretty sure when you get into that position, starting with a very kind of very, very basic start in life, he's probably very streetwise. He fought wild animals to protect his sheep. He certainly had his wits about him. He would have had great intellect, and a very close relationship with God, who gave him everything he had. But as the writer Oscar Wilde once said, I can resist everything except temptation. We read in 2 Samuel verse 11, David is up on the roof of the palace and he saw this beautiful woman bathing. She was very beautiful. David sent someone to find out about her. The man said, she's Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. And David sent his messengers to get her. The temptation was out right in front of him. Beautiful women. I'm sure he was surrounded by many other beautiful women around the court, but this one was married, and married to one of his commanders, an important person within David's army. David's actions clearly showed he'd allowed his soul to be penetrated by sin. He surely knew what he was doing was wrong. Despite that, despite all the things he'd gone through in his life, the position he was in, how he'd achieved that position, the blessings that God had bestowed upon him, he didn't want for anything. His defences were weak. To make matters worse, the evening's activities after he met her resulted in her becoming pregnant. Then David goes and has her husband murdered as a result. The consequences of his actions are very clear in 2 Samuel verse 12. I like physics. I remember studying physics at school. Sir Isaac Newton's third law states, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. Put this into a spiritual context. If you do something wrong, be very prepared for the consequences. Job 1 verse 21, the Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. Look at Samson. He's another character being extremely blessed by God. Supernatural strength. He had a very smart personality. The riddles he created to try and confuddle the people who was trying to get information and stuff from him. But he had a weakness, and that weakness was a weakness for women. So we've got a bit of a pattern appearing here. and certainly a weakness for allowing the wrong kind into his life, which ultimately led to his downfall, as we're all too familiar to. So you may have heard of a piece of software, a piece of technology rather, called a firewall. Now, a firewall, in its most simple terms, is a wall that's designed to stop things, particularly fire, getting through it. You think of a sense of a building. These would obviously be quite big, strong concrete walls designed to control the flow or movement of a fire through a building in a certain way to allow people who are in there to get out as quickly as possible in the event they needed to evacuate the building. In computer terms, it's a piece of software or sometimes hardware, so the box with some wires and cables and flashing lights on. Its function is to control what can get into your computer or your network, which is a group of computers, and also what can come from the inside out. Now, with a firewall, we set up what's called a series of rules. Allow these things to come in and these things not to come in, and the same with things going out. So we look at the title of my sermon, which is around how we protect our soul, how we can ensure the security of our soul. And let's look at how that electronic analogy can fit into a spiritual context. Now, I think our faith is very much this firewall to our soul. We use the Bible to set the rules. It's probably the best guide on how to protect our soul from sin. If we look at it in the context we're talking around, it is a book about all the ways you can get a virus, how you can be attacked, to receive the denial of service or have your soul compromised. So you can forget McAfee, Norton, Kaspersky or Bitdefender or any of these other antivirus and firewall systems. Time in the Bible is what you need to invest in your efforts in to improve your spiritual security. I'm sure you've all heard of the dummy books. It's a very well-known book. You'll find this in any big bookstore. It's got a black and yellow cover. And these titles cover a wide range of subject matters and put things into very plain English with clear explanations, lots of pictures, but most of all some real-world examples on how to do something, to learn the subject matter which you're interested in. Now, if you excuse the potential blasphemy here, but we could call the Bible the dummy's guide for securing our soul. We've already looked at two real-world examples in David and Samson. There's many more we could explore as well. The do's and what not to do's, the how and how not to do it. Now, out of the box, a computer firewall will come with some basic rules, really obvious ones. The Ten Commandments are a great example that stand out as an analogy of these. They're very unambiguous, and dare I say, they're pretty easy to follow. They are basic rules. However, it's still our decision to go ahead and use the rules that have been presented, whether that's on our electronic or our spiritual firewall. So going along with the analogy then, God has provided this firewall in the form of faith. By focusing on Him, by staying true to Him, by understanding Him, we have a high awareness of what is good, what is bad, what is truth, what is false, what is right, what is wrong, where the evil is in all of that. But we still have the responsibility of control over the defaults that He has provided. Now, most security software that you may install on your computer will give you a warning if you try and do something that it believes is dangerous or insecure. So the default rules, the systems it has in the background, if you go to a website which it thinks is bad or could cause problems, you will often get a little message to say, are you sure you want to do this? It's through that relationship we have with God then that by putting our faith in Him, we develop this conscience, this discernment. We have a spiritual gift known as discernment, knowing what is good or evil, knowing what is right or wrong, working out if something that looks good, looks as though it's plausible, is actually going to be genuine or not, or could cause us some harm down the way. But despite his best attempts to warn us, in the same way that a security software works, you can still override it. God can provide rules for us to follow, recommendations, advice, but it's still in our ability through complete freedom to override it. Unfortunately, in those situations, the consequences of that are on our own heads. Now, in the IT world, there's something called an IP address, Internet Protocol. Now, this is a long number with some dots, and it's a unique number designed to identify every computer individually on the internet. Now, if you look at the human equivalent of that, your IP address is exposed to the public. So if somebody wanted to find you and they knew your number, they could find you through this way. So if we look at this from our spiritual context, our physical form is this IP address. If somebody looks for us, then they see us, the physical shape of a human being. So access into our body then is through our senses, our skin, our eyes, our ears, our nose, our mouth. Behind that firewall, behind our body, once we have these senses that things come into, is this defense mechanism. The defense between our senses of things coming in and our soul inside. Now, we control these inputs. Our faith, that relationship we have with God, is critical in managing and setting all that up. We control what we eat, what we watch, what we hear, what we touch. We have total control of that ourselves. But in the same way the devil was able to persuade Eve to do something with fatal consequences, he works so hard through every single means at his disposal to force us, to convince us, to set up the rules which are not quite perfect, to allow in a little bit more wrong than we should really be doing. The problem there is the more we start to open up things, the more we let down our guard, the more we reduce the strength of these rules, the more and more we allow the devil into our life to then take over. To the point where there's so much coming in to our soul, into our very being ourselves, of a destructive nature, it's hard to see what is right, what is wrong, and where to even begin to try and block it out. So, as I mentioned at the start, a firewall works in two ways. We control what comes in, but also what comes out from us as well. This is where it's so important to be in very, very careful control and monitor what we broadcast to those out around us. And this is something that's become all too apparent over the last 18 months, where we've seen huge amounts of information being broadcast from all kinds of channels with so-called genuine news, conspiracy theories, and it becomes so difficult to identify what is right from what is wrong when there's so much being pushed out and so much in the public face without any real genuine background or evidence to justify it. We have to be so careful what we share to people that there's a genuine source and an accuracy around that as well. So with this denial of service attack, the world is continually trying to attack us on all fronts. And like these electronic attacks, it can shut us down physically. We become emotionally overburdened and completely bamboozled with information, with noise, with the media, with social media, with adverts, with a never-ending stream of material, all trying to stop us from functioning, which completely distracts us from what is good, what is right, and what is truthful. So it's at that point then which our spiritual firewall is so important. The strength of it will depend on how well we can resist the attacks. Once a denial of service attack has started, it's very hard to actually stop it. The strength to get through, to persevere. Sometimes the only way to do it is to completely change our focus, to pull away from groups that we know are bad, from media channels that we know are sprouting false information. The more we broadcast our faith, the more we expose to the outside world who we are, what we're about, the more likely we expose ourselves to becoming under attack from people who try to expose a weakness in our faith, in our arguments. And the same in the business world, that big businesses, big corporations are the ones that suffer the most from groups protesting against their business practices, whether you agree with that kind of behaviour or not. The more you expose what you are, who you are, what you believe in, the more opportunity you present for people to then attack you. Do you ever feel that as Christians then, we suffer far more than non-believers when it comes to being under attack? I certainly think we do. I think our faith has been tested to a level unseen or unheard of for many, many years over the last 18 months or so. So in that case, we have to be so prepared to react, to combat the attacks. From the very first day of his ministry, Jesus was under attack. Every action he did was under close scrutiny and criticism, questioned all the time on every single front. He'd had 30 years to prepare himself on earth, and untold time before that though. But he had this supernatural firewall that whatever was thrown at him, he had the means to articulate a detailed and insightful and powerful response that nobody could actually pick holes in or argue against. He could react and divert the attack away. We all know many stories through the Bible. Wherever he went, he was surrounded by crowds of people. At first, they just wanted to see him, to touch him, to be healed by him. But in the end, these became big groups of people baying for his blood, to allow one who took lives from humanity back into their own society, instead of saving the one who saved lives. Now, I don't think it is possible for us as mortal sinners to ever come within a mile of knowledge of Scripture, or the wit and reasoning to respond to every attack in the way that Jesus did. It's just not physically possible. But with a carefully measured, tactful and purposed response on the back of good knowledge, study and understanding, doesn't mean we should just give up and not try. To give up means we just turn our firewall off. We drop our defences. We give up. Now, with that approach, it will not be long, I guarantee you, before those intent on causing harm will start to attack. Satan is the hacker's hacker, the leader of all attacks, a master of the virus. He's been doing this for thousands of years. But we have so many promises to hold on to, things we can use to boost our defences, to reassure us, to strengthen our resolve, to keep strong, to set the rules on our spiritual firewall. We read in Hebrews 13, verse 5, "Let your conduct be without covetousness. Be content with such things as you have, for he himself has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Reading into verse 6, so we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me? Now, I think that's a fantastic promise to have. I know firsthand over the years the feeling of being left alone. To not have anyone around to offer comfort and support. It's a very painful and lonely and at times scary experience. But that is what it is, experience. At the time I felt like God had left me to suffer. But looking back, I can see now, years down the line, the lessons that I learned from it, from those experiences. It made me stronger, more able to deal with troubles further down the line and in the future. To learn better rules on how to defend and protect myself from those problems. Psalm 23 verse 4. I remember doing a sermon on this whole chapter, Psalm 23. And verse 4 is one that stands out, and it's so appropriate to the times where we're living in now. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. For you are with me, your rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Now, an easy way to avoid getting attacked is to minimise the situations when you're exposed to it. It's pretty simple when you think about it. If you consciously decide to walk down a dark back street in the centre of Manchester at night, there's a reasonable prospect you may get a nasty surprise. That's kind of the context at which you could almost read Psalm 23 verse 4. But there are times when we have no choice. The only way forward is down that dark valley, that darkest valley. But what that text says to me is that even when you do walk down this route, because there is no other option available to you, God is still with you. And that's something we can, if that's the only thing that you take from this short message today, that God is with you in the darkest, most desperate situations, then I hope that gives you encouragement, if nothing else. We read in Exodus 14, there's 2 verses in that. Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." God is on your side. He is fighting your corner. Even when things seem with no possible further options, no way forward, God is on your side. Things happening in the background, you have no idea what's going on. Nahum chapter 1 verse 7. The Lord is good, a refuge in times of trouble. He cares for those who trust in him. When things go wrong, we can seek refuge in him. But we have to have that relationship before we can fully appreciate what he can do for us. You can read in 2 Samuel 22. And reading from verse 1. David sang to the Lord the words of this song when the Lord delivered him from the hands of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. He said, "The Lord is my rock, my fortress and my deliverer. My God is my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation. He's my stronghold, my refuge and my saviour from violent people. You save me." Again, another such encouraging verse in the Bible to give us confidence and hope in how a relationship with God will help us and protect us. And Isaiah 41 verse 10 is another fantastic verse. All of these in the NIV version, by the way. "So do not fear, I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." So then, what can we do to check that our spiritual security system is working okay? Now, the IT industry invests massive amounts of time and effort to develop new technologies to counter cyber attacks and cyber terrorism. We now have software that can react intelligently. It has the ability for heuristics. It can self-learn. We have machine learning and artificial intelligence where computers can actually start thinking for themselves. If certain things happen, then apply this kind of logic and actually start behaving in a very, very human way. Now, it's a long, long way to go in that area, but there's an awful lot of intelligence that software can now do. But from our spiritual security then, what can we do? And I think there's 3 things I'd like to share with you. First of all, be prepared. Knowing that something is out there that can cause harm. Blissful ignorance, complacency and naivety are the greatest threat to our spiritual security. It is a surefire guarantee that we will be attacked in some way or another. Someone or something will, at some point in your life, do something to impact your faith or try to attack you. Even if it only goes as far as to put that question in your mind, why? That's the very tiny little opening we spoke about a few minutes. That question of doubt in your mind. If you imagine your firewall having many doors and walls in layers, that question, why? That first door has just been opened. Why have I lost my job? My relationship, my marriage has just broken. My best friend died. Why? He's in. He's got through that very, very first barrier. He's into your system, your spiritual security system. That very first defense has been compromised. Second point then, in terms of being prepared, is testing. Now, I've spent many years working in software development. And one of the things that we do with any kind of web application is to perform penetration testing. Literally, how easy is it, or how difficult it is, for somebody to break into the system by attempting an attack and checking how the system can respond to deal with it, to see where any security areas are open for exposure or how a weakness could be exploited. Where are they? We can easily see how we respond to deal with certain events or circumstances and how we measure our responses to them. That is often a good telltale of how good our security is. When we see something on the news, when we read something, how we react to it, how we respond to it is a telltale sign of how good our current level of awareness is. And then thirdly, training. That regular refreshment and improvement on knowledge and understanding on newly discovered or understood threats. Read the Bible. Pray, share, discuss with fellow believers. That's one of the most important ways to improve our training. To talk to people who share the same concerns that we do. To help use their experiences to boost our own understanding. We shouldn't just rely purely on our own experiences, which in some areas may be very, very limited. We have to rely on support from those around us, from friends, from trusted people to help us along on this journey as well. So in closing then, just a few simple thoughts. Keep watch. Be prepared. This has been sort of a basic crash course in how internet security works. But if we look at it from a spiritual context, I hope it's given you some food for thought on how we can be better prepared, how we can keep safe. But most of all, and I think this is so important in the times we're living in at the moment, to take encouragement from the scriptures. for those messages that said, I am with you always. I will never leave you or forsake you. And it's with those that we can be better prepared for the times we're living in, but now and also for what is yet to come.